As you know, the U.S. House and Senate passed a $700 billion bailout to Wall Street. At the behest of President George W. Bush, the U.S. taxpayers are going to be on the hook for what can only be referred to as the biggest fraud in U.S. history. Virtually our entire financial system is based on an illusion. We spend more than we earn, we consume more than we produce, we borrow more than we save, and we cling to the fantasy that this can go on forever. The glue that holds this crumbling scheme together is a fiat currency known as the Federal Reserve Note, which was created out of thin air by an international banking cartel called the Federal Reserve. According to Congressman Ron Paul, in the last 3 years, the Federal Reserve has created over $4 trillion in new money. The result of all this money out of thin air fraud is never-ending inflation. And the more prices rise, the more the dollar collapses. Folks, this is not sustainable. Already, Bear Stearns was awarded a $29 billion bailout, followed quickly by the bailout of Freddie and Fannie that will cost the taxpayers up to $200 billion. Then the Fed announced the bailout of AIG to the tune of $85 billion. Mind you, AIG is an enormous global entity with assets totaling more than $1 trillion. Moreover, the Feds agreed to pump $180 billion into global money markets, and the Treasury Department promised $50 billion to ensure the holdings of money market mutual funds for a year. Now taxpayers are being asked to provide $700 billion to Wall Street. And I hope listeners are aware that not only will American banks be bailed out, but foreign banks will be bailed out as well. Then again, at least half of the Federal Reserve is comprised of foreign banks. In other words, the Federal Reserve is preparing to spend upwards of $1 trillion or more. Remember again, this is fiat money, meaning it is money printed out of thin air. All of this began when the United States Congress abrogated its responsibility to maintain sound money principles on behalf of the American people as required by the Constitution and created the Federal Reserve. This took place in 1913. President was Woodrow Wilson. I strongly encourage listeners to buy G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Since then, the U.S. economy has suffered through one Great Depression, several recessions, all of which have been orchestrated by this international banking cartel. Now we are facing total economic collapse. But don't worry, the international bankers will lose nothing, not even their bonuses. They will maintain their mansions, yachts, private jets, and Swiss bank accounts. No matter how bad it gets on Main Street, the banksters on Wall Street will still have the best of it. President Bush and the Congress will make sure of that. This is one thing Republicans and Democrats can agree on. America's founders were rightfully skeptical of granting too much power to bankers. Thomas Jefferson said, quote, "If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all their property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered," close quote. Jefferson also believed that, quote, "banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale," close quote. Daniel Webster warned, quote, "Of all the contrivances for cheating the laboring classes of mankind, none has been more effectual than that which deludes them with paper money," close quote. Webster also said, quote, "We are in danger of being overwhelmed with irredeemable paper, mere paper, representing not gold or silver, no sir, representing nothing but broken promises, bad faith, bankrupt corporations, cheated creditors, and a ruined people," close quote. Our first and greatest president, George Washington, said, quote, "Paper money has had the effect in your state," meaning Rhode Island, "that it ever will have, to ruin commerce, oppress the honest, and open the door to every species of fraud and injustice," close quote. If George W. Bush, John McCain, or Barack Obama had any honesty and integrity, they would approach the current banking malady in much the same way that President Andrew Jackson did. In discussing the bank renewal bill with a delegation of bankers in 1832, Jackson said, quote, "Gentlemen, I've had men watching you for a long time, and I'm convinced that you have used the funds of the bank to speculate in the breadstuffs of the country. When you won, you divided the profits amongst you, and when you lost, you charged it to the bank. You tell me that if I take the deposits from the bank and annul its charter, I shall ruin 10,000 families. That may be true, gentlemen, but that is your sin. Should I let you go on, you will ruin 50,000 families, and that would be my sin. You are a den of vipers and thieves. I intend to rout you out, and by the eternal God, I will rout you out." Closed quote. What President Andrew Jackson said to the bankers in 1832 is exactly what an American president should say to these criminal international bankers today. But what George Bush, John McCain, Barack Obama want to do is provide amnesty for the international bankers, just as they want to provide amnesty for illegal aliens. I say, no amnesty for Wall Street, and no amnesty for illegal aliens either. Instead of sending these banksters on extended vacations to the Bahamas with millions of taxpayer dollars in their pockets, we should be sending them straight to jail. The only way to fix this economic mess that the international bankers have created is to return America to sound money principles as prescribed in the U.S. Constitution. This means dismantling the Federal Reserve and the Internal Revenue Service, overturning the 16th Amendment and the personal income tax, and returning the American monetary system to hard assets, gold and silver. Anything short of this will only delay and worsen the inevitable collapse that has already begun. I encourage you to go to Baldwin08.com